What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel. I am Harrison, and today you are here for Tutorial Tuesday. It's my favorite time of week because I get to teach you how to draw some of your favorite characters. What is Tutorial Tuesday? Tutorial Tuesday is every single Tuesday I will be teaching you how to draw some of your favorite characters. If you don't see a character that you would like to draw, please drop it down in the comments. Let me know who you would like to learn how to draw, and we can make that happen. Today, we're drawing Brook from One Piece. So, grab your pencils, pens, markers, sketchbooks, and loose paper, and let's jump on in. So, Brook is one of the more simpler characters that we'll be drawing. We're going to start off with a nice, big, kind of oval shape just to get his skull in the place that we want it. And for this piece, he's going to be right in the bottom corner of our page. Make sure the top of his head is nice and rounded off. We're going to start dividing the drawing into sections. We want to divide it where his eyebrow line and his mouth line is. That way we know where our sections are going. Once we have that, draw a nice big circle for where the top of his skull is. And then underneath that, we can draw the bottom section of his teeth. Add a small gap, and then below that, let's indicate the bottom teeth and his jaw. We can also indicate the bottom of his chin, and then off to the side, we can add the collar to his shirt. So in today's drawing, I am trying out a different method. I am using a very light pencil to get my initial sketch, and then I'm using a more soft lead pencil to provide a thicker line so that I know which lines I want to keep for the inking process. This is something you don't have to do. I'm experimenting. I wanted to try to find a new way to solidify my sketch and drawing before I jumped into the next process. If you want to follow along in this specific process, I believe I'm using a 6B pencil. Any soft lead or thick lead pencils will give you this effect. So now that we have Brook's head silhouette solidified, we can add his eyebrow line, and then we can add in the eye socket. So from the eyebrow line, we're essentially going to be drawing the letter D. If you think about the curve of the eye socket, it looks like the letter D. And then dash in a little definition for where the bone starts to curve. And just below that eye socket, we can now add the bridge of his nose and then the area where his nose would be. Now, if we move just slightly over from the nose, we can draw a nice rounded circle. This will be his other eye. Your circle does not have to be perfect. It is a skull. Skulls are not perfect shapes. Nothing in the human body is perfect shape. So it can be round, it can be oval, it can be a little wonky. Maybe he was in a fight. This is your drawing. You get to choose. But once we have that circle, let's add some definition around it. We can drop in where his cheek line would be, and then we can define some of the raised areas around his eye. And then just below the eye, we can drop in the cheekbone. Now we can do his teeth. And because this is One Piece, everything is very stylized. And why wouldn't Brook's teeth be? Think of your teeth as either giant M's or just sticks with round tops to them. They are your classic cartoon teeth. And just remember that as you start, make sure they're bigger in the front and get smaller as they recede to the back. Now, with the bottom teeth, I just mirrored the exact teeth that were on the top. Based on the reference image I was using, the teeth were pretty much mirrored, so I think in this case we can just make sure that they're almost identical. Brook is already one of the most distinctive One Piece characters, solely for the fact that he is a walking, talking skeleton with an afro. But one of his most signifying things about him is his skull fracture across his forehead. So why don't we go ahead and drop that in? You could see that I attempted to do it and then erased it. I did it a little too big. So what I did was I figured out where I wanted the fracture to start and then where I wanted it to end. And then from there, I added the zigzags and shapes that I wanted it to be. That way it wasn't completely occupying his entire forehead. We now have all of our details that make up Brook. We can go in and add fractures and shadow and different things that will help develop this character. So now I grab my original pencil, the HB, your classic pencil, and I shaded in both eye sockets. And because of the pose that Brook is in, he's in like a look down, like 3/4 view with the shadow on half of his face. We're gonna go in and just draw nice swooping hash marks. We just want to indicate that some of his face is cast in shadow. Here we can use this opportunity to add in any other details, battle scars, any more cracks, He doesn't really have blood, but he gets like scuffed, so we can add that here right before we get into the inking. Now to add one of Brook's most distinctive characteristics, his afro. So with his afro, it's going to be right along the edge of his skull, and for this we can just add all sorts of different zigzags and curves and curls to make it look kind of poofy and attached to his skull. This is not something that has to be perfect. Make it your own. Do whatever feels natural. Just remember, always have fun with your drawings. Nothing has to be exact or as specific to your reference. Have fun. Try to make things your own, and that way you're not just copying someone else's drawing. And if you were wondering, are we inking this piece? We sure are. I, like always, will be using dip pen and brush, but that doesn't mean you have to. Grab a Sharpie, a fine liner, a ballpoint pen, anything that you would like, you can use to ink your drawing. As I say every time, using the dip pen and brush, always start from left to right. You don't want to smudge your drawing. Now, if you're left-handed, start right to left. You just don't want anything smudging as you're moving across the page. I would highly recommend doing this even if you're using a Sharpie or a marker or a fine tip. Sometimes the ink, depending on the type of paper you're using, doesn't dry right away, so you still have the ability to smudge with the bottom of your hand. But with the dip pen, we're going to be able to control the flow of ink better. So on certain lines, you can see it on the eye socket that these lines are a little bit thicker, giving more definition to those specific areas. Now, when doing something like the shadow hash marks, we want a very nice light hand. We don't want so much ink, we just want the indication of shadow. So these are very light, soft strokes. Almost the ink is drying up, and we might need to redip any minute. You can also achieve this with the fine liner as well. You might want to practice on another page. You're just going to be using very light strokes. The pen should barely be on the page. If you would like a separate tutorial on inking and using different various pens to achieve certain techniques, please let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to make a video for that. If you would also like a more involved video on dip pen and brush, please let me know and I can also make that. And just as a friendly reminder, if you're following my school of thought where the ink is the last step, we are making sure that our inking lines are very clean, very deliberate. We don't want to treat this like we're sketching. Unless you are going for a sketchy style of drawing, we want to make sure that our lines are very purposeful. Everything is going down on the page with ink for a reason. So take your time, be swift when you have to be swift, follow those lines that you put down. You sketched for a reason, now let's clean it up. When you're inking, also have fun with it. Sometimes things happen with the ink and you need to make course corrections and you just have to kind of go with the flow, no pun intended. But things do happen, and if they aren't fixable, you kind of just have to go with it. Inking is so much fun. So relax, don't worry if things get messed up. Just kind of go with it and see what happens. Now to the most fun part of this piece. We are going to fill in the entire page with black ink. This is a very stylized picture of Brook, where we're not just going to fill in his afro, we are just going to completely fill in the page. It's going to look really cool, it's going to be very different. You just have to trust the process on this one. Now, the big mistake that I made here was I did not wait until my inks dried. Typically before I move on to something like this, where the ink will cover most of the page and we'll have to go into the face or into the drawing to add larger areas of ink, I would typically wait 20 minutes at least so that the inks can dry, and that way there's no room for smudging. Now with Brook, I got really impatient and thought that if I just maybe flip the page around, I could start this way and move inwards. You can see I smudge a little bit, but that doesn't stop me. So one thing I'll say here is I really love using the brush to fill in my inks just because you can cover a much larger ground of area with a brush and wet ink than you can with a Sharpie. You could get one of the king or giant Sharpies and do the same thing, but I personally like the look of using liquid ink in a brush. I feel like you get a much more rich tone, and personally, aside from it drying, I feel like it goes way faster and you can get some really cool effects with ink. If you know how to work the brush, use dry brush, you can get some really cool effects. And this one, I'm just going to fill the page. So if you noticed, I stopped right above the hairline where things get a little jagged. I didn't want to rush into that area because what would happen is using a bigger brush, it holds more ink. So pushing that ink into those really tiny tight spaces would just cause the ink to kind of bleed out, and we would have a jumbled mush and not defined spikes. So I grabbed my detail brush and used that to get those really nice fine details. Now to fill in the eye sockets and the nose. Like I said, I typically would wait for the ink to dry at least 20 minutes. Maybe with something like this that has the whole page filled with ink, I'd probably wait 30 minutes. But I was so impatient, I just wanted to fill in all the ink. I didn't wait. If you are not going to wait for your ink to dry, make sure that your hand is resting on something that is far above your page, or you have something that you can lean your arm on so that your hand is not touching the paper. That would be the only thing I would say if you don't want to wait for your inks to dry to do that, just so that your hand is not resting on your freshly inked lines. So how do we erase these pencils? You can see that my page is still wet in certain areas, but on the face, it had been 20, maybe 30 minutes, and we're good to go. So using a nice big plastic eraser, I was very soft. I held down the page so that nothing would crinkle. We just want to go soft over those pencil lines. Another pro tip here is when erasing, go very easy, very soft. I know it sounds ridiculous, like, why are you telling me how to erase? But sometimes if you're too hard, and it happens to me all the time, paper gets crinkled because I'm putting too much pressure, I'm going too fast. Just go nice and easy. You don't want your drawing to be ruined right here at the last step. Now, a big faux pas that I did here was I brushed away the eraser shavings, and you can see clearly that my drawing is still wet. The page is still wet. So what if I accidentally hit some ink as I swipe through? I would have gotten ink all across Brook's face, and that would have just ruined the drawing. So, but if your page is completely dry, feel free to swipe. Actually, even that I would say don't do. Get yourself something like this. It is an eraser brush. This one is kind of overkill. It's for bigger drawings. You could use a nice big paintbrush, or you could blow the shavings off, or you could get some sort of fan. But this is really nice because once you erase, you just brush everything away. You don't have to worry about your hand if it has ink or oils on it or any extra pencil lead. You can just brush those shavings off and nothing happens to your drawing. And then I realized we missed a few details, so I dropped those in with a fine tip pen, and then I had to bust out the whiteout because I didn't wait, so things got a little smudgy. That's okay, it's a couple little dots, easy fixes. And there we have it. There is Brook from One Piece. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Hit that bell notification so you know when I post the next Tutorial Tuesday. I really hope you got something out of today's video. If for some reason you did not, please let me know in the comments what I can change, how I can make these videos better. Are there certain techniques you would like to see me focus on? Was I going too fast, not fast enough, too slow? I want to know your feedback. If there's a specific character you would like to learn how to draw, please also drop that in the comments. Thank you again for joining me today, and I will see you next week for another Tutorial Tuesday. And until then, keep drawing and keep practicing. Every day you will get better. Just keep doing it. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you next time. Yo! Yo!